It is, in fact, Wednesday, 11, it's top of the hour, noon Eastern Standard Time. It's October 25th. And for those who have never met me, my name is Teddy Burriss, and you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. And Randy, one sec, is the dude who's by himself. You may not see him yet because you're looking at our graphic, but my cohort in arms, I'll introduce you to him in a minute. I'll get him to introduce our special guest, plural, in a minute as well. But for those who have never met me, I'm Teddy Burriss. Again, I'm a LinkedIn strategist, trainer, coach, advisor, guide, mentor. Some people call me guru, and I just don't like that word because it puts too much on my shoulders and freaks me out. But my business teaches people how to use LinkedIn as a business tool. We do one-on-one coaching, corporate training programs, seminars, workshops, public speaking, keynote speeches. And those of you who know me, you know I will stand on a corner, and I love this word, and proselytize about the power of using LinkedIn as a business tool. So, Randy, did I get my ducks rolling in the right direction, dude?
They are rolling, and the dogs are singing, or whatever other metaphor things you're talking about over there. But yeah, we're ready to roll. I think everything is up and running, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. So we are set to go. And yet another week, show number 185. Lunch with Randy and Teddy started way back when. But Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, director for the Professional Center, based here in Winston. I have clients all over the place, galactically. I mean, not just here. We're talking all over the.
Now you're pulling my leg with the galactically thing.
Well, it's a cyber. We talk about cyberspace. So, cyber is good enough for me. So there you go. We're free. Get you on the calendar. Find me on LinkedIn. We're happy to help. And again, I got folks from all different industries, functions, ages, you name it. I mean, job hunting is unfortunately part of life, and it never hurts to get a little help, especially when it doesn't cost you anything. I'm happy to help where I can. Every week, Teddy and I get together on a Wednesday. We learn things. We have fun along the way, and this week's no exception. We have actually a husband and wife team today, Mariah and Byron Edgington.
Did Mariah want you to share that? We didn't ask permission to share that, Randy.
Oh, is it top secret?
I don't know. We just didn't ask permission. Maybe she didn't want anybody to know that.
Coming to us live from Tampa, Florida. They are the husband and wife duo with some pretty cool messages that'll impact our lives here. We're going to learn a lot today. And they have their own firm called Mandate to Elevate. We'll learn more about that. But first, if you have comments or questions for the Edgingtons, put them in the chat area. Teddy will keep an eagle eye on that. Eagle, Teddy. Eagle.
I got it.
Close.
You want me to step up to the plate a little bit better than usual?
Just stay awake, Teddy. That's all we ask. Stay awake and stay on task. But yeah, we're going to learn more today. So first, let me throw it to you two, both Mariah and Byron, if you would. Tell us just a little bit more about your background, if you would, please.
Yeah, sure. Hey, first, thanks for having us on. We just love talking about this stuff. One thing that your listeners will notice during this, and we're not going to apologize for it, we are passionate about this topic. And as to where Mandate to Elevate came from our professional lives in our past careers. Me as a pilot, my job description was raising people up. That's what I did all day long.
But wait a minute, but Byron, you also were responsible for a controlled crash.
Well, on occasion, yeah, but then we always said any landing you can walk away from is a good one. Yeah. So anyway, as a pilot, that was my job description, to raise people up all day. So that's what I got pretty good at. Mariah, as a nurse, she took people from their traumatic or their medical crises and raised them up back into to get their lives back. And so in retirement, we said, you know what, we were pretty darn good at that. And so let's keep doing it. That's where it came from. We have a mandate to elevate others.
Mandate to elevate. So now you just recently moved to Tampa. Where had you been based for many years?
So we've moved many, many times, actually about 17 times, and in 283 months. So do the math there. And we just really enjoy being able to, as Byron said, elevate people. Now, We, during the pandemic, lived in Iowa, where my mom lived with us in a house so that she didn't have to go through the pandemic alone. And so we came recently from Iowa to Tampa, Florida, and we had to move because we sold this snowblower.
Yeah, had no choice. Yeah.
Hey, if we could get you a little closer to the microphone so we can hear you a little bit better. Teddy, everything okay on your end with that?
I want to ask, what city in Iowa, Mariah?
Iowa City.
Iowa City. Okay. And that like, is that the capital of Iowa? I can't remember. What's the
Used to be.
Des Moines is the
Des
capital,
Moines,
but,
yeah.
but Iowa City is the home of the Hawkeyes, and
Oh,
that's
that's right.
their famous
That's
there, I
right,
guess.
yeah.
And writers,
Yeah.
There you
Well,
go.
why did you sell the snowblower?
please tell me Tampa doesn't have snow.
Then we're all in trouble. Hey, we're going to learn about elevating yourself by shifting your mindset. And one of the things I always ask the why question, I think you guys already kind of jumped in on that, the passion for what you do and so forth. So the mindset. Now, we've had other guests on that have talked about how the mind operates. And I think science is learning more and more over time about how it operates, but also, and I think this is kind of interesting, that to a degree, we have control over the mind. And to me, that in itself is fascinating. That do we have that ability, that control? So that's kind of where we're headed today, folks. If you're watching the show, the mindset that we bring to life, what control do we have over it? How do we exercise that control? What's its outcome? How does it impact us for better or worse? Because it's not all roses, and a lot of folks are mired in what I'll call the muck, and unless or until they can get out of that, they're kind of stuck in that rut. So we're going to talk through some terminology today. You're going to learn terminology, what is neurodiversity, neuromasking, neurotypical, and so forth. So we're going to dive into that. But again, if you have comments, questions, keep an eye. Teddy will keep an eye on the chat, put them in there, and we'll try to work those in. So let's first off start with some definitions. One thing that's I hear it and I see it, but I never really knew what it was, and that is neurodiversity. Could you explain what that is?
Well, in 1998, Australian woman who was doing her doctorate in sociology coined the term neurodiversity. And what she was doing was trying to identify an umbrella term that encompassed a bunch of people and a bunch of different mindsets and brains. And now we know that neurodivergent people are about 20% of the population. And there are some famous people who have been identified as neurodivergent. Now, Byron is neurotypical. His brain functions in a far different way than mine does. And I am neurodivergent. I have ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. And those terms were unfamiliar to me. And so as a professional nurse, I was very highly trained. I was extremely competent in my field. But it's looking back now, I realize that I really inherited from my mindset. I took on a lot of things that happened as a child. I was labeled many different things because my brain functioned differently. And no one, when I was growing up, understood this. Even now, people are unfamiliar with these terms. However, because of that, I have now learned that I have an opportunity and a responsibility to bring this information to people. And so before I launch into any other thing, I will identify some of these things that you mentioned, which is, Randy, the terms themselves. So neurodivergent is, as we've heard from many researchers, where the mind is not of a neurodivergent person does not function in the exact way that a neurotypical mind works. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is.
It's different.
For example, with me, with my dyslexia, I often turn letters around. As a matter of fact, I always see I before E. It doesn't matter if it comes after C or not. And there are many traits that I have. I've looked back now and realized when I'm writing, I include both cursive and print in the same word. That's not always typical in a neurotypical brain. I oftentimes will switch words around when I'm writing. If I was writing something that was the dog went to, I might write dog the went. So
Reading too.
when I'm reading, I didn't realize this. So
No.
these are just different things. One thing that we noticed early on in our relationship was, and we didn't have any idea what this was.
Oh.
I don't identify right and left well often, or directions are very complicated for me. So there's just little certain things that are part of dysgraphia and dyscalculia and dyslexia that go on in my brain. I'm really excited to say that now that I know these things, I can bring this information to people who don't realize that they're really not crazy, dumb, and stupid. That's just the way their brain works. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've got enough, Randy. I've got enough. She just cleared a lot up for me.
Well, and you know, I want to be correct or appropriate in some of the terminology that I use. So, you know, if I say something that's inappropriate, it wouldn't be the first time, Teddy.
Yeah,
But
no,
it's I'm learning new terminology. So when I use the words like normal, okay, that implies that others are abnormal, and that's clearly not what you're saying. It's, I guess, what I would call typical versus atypical. It still gets to the end game, but you just have to navigate the waters because the process to get from A to B isn't linear in some cases, and it just may require a little more care and feeding.
That's right.
Kind of fair way to put it.
Yeah.
So a lot going on there. I'm just kind of curious, at what point in your life did you begin to sense that you're different? And ostracized, or just however you want to take it. But at what point did you begin to go, wait a minute, is it me? What's going on here?
Well, that's a really good question, because anybody who is neurodivergent, even if they haven't been diagnosed with neurodivergence, they know they're different because we grew up that way. And my difference is this is a very valid question, Randy. I didn't know I was different, except that other people pointed out. And it was familiar to me to hear, why can't you just be normal? And I had no idea what to do with that as a child or growing up. And I even heard it as an adult. And so it was very uncomfortable. I knew I was different from the get-go when I first started realizing. I think that's probably the similar thing as when you first really realize, okay, I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I'm whatever I am. You notice those things, you're not sure why. But forever, I knew I was different.
Were you able to find other kindred souls that also kind of felt that way, kind of be able to confide in people, or did you kind of feel alone going through life? Just that you don't fit in, or it just doesn't seem to work for you? How did that
it was interesting. I knew my place in the world. I knew that I wasn't enough. I was very different than most people. I was tiny by stature. I'd walk down the hall and some kids who were, now I look back and they were basically bullies, would grab me and throw me into a school locker and shut the door. And other kids would laugh and say, oh, she deserves to be in there. And it was just common for me to be bullied. And so that's why I have so much compassion, and I really want this message to go out that people don't have to identify that way forever, that there are tools and tips, and I've created something I call the I Am affirmation exercise that on our website I have a free download of, because I want people to know they can switch their brains through mindset by doing I Am affirmations. And I can go into that later, or
we'll get to that in a minute. And I think, Teddy, you've put
I'm grabbing the I Am PDF right now.
Yeah, and also for a limited time only, at only 99 cents, you can own your very own copy of a couple of books that these folks have out. So if what we're saying today resonates with you.
Yeah, let me elaborate on what Mariah said, if I may. Just
please.
In fact, one of those books, the Mindset Matters book, we talk about this in more detail. But this is part of what drives our passion for this, because when we finally realized why these stylistic differences, and we realized, for example, Mariah mentioned not being able to tell directions. And there was a reason when we flew together, I was in the cockpit and she was behind me with the patient. There was a reason for that. So, and in a joking way, I don't mean to belittle it, but we learned a long time ago that when she tells me which direction to go, I automatically go the other, not right, but left, because what she really means when she says right is left. And it's just a stylistic difference, but it's something to be aware of. And also, my point here is, I'm getting there eventually. We are passionate about this, and we will tell people these things are not deficits. They are benefits. And we all need to explore these differences, because we're losing out on a lot of really valuable input from 20% of our population if we don't explore this and discover what those benefits are.
Yeah. And I may have that directional issue. I just am horrible with directions. I mean, horrible. And it's thank goodness for GPS, and even that'll mess you up from time to time. But I can get lost on a one-way street. I mean, it's just horrible. And I've been that way as long as I can remember. And I'm a reasonably bright guy. Teddy will tell you.
Reasonably. I'm going
reasonably.
Yeah.
Reasonably bright guy, but I recognize I have a deficit there. And so you don't want me to be the co-pilot, the navigator guy. So we'd end up in Kansas or something. I don't know if it just would not end well.
Let's take Dale's conversation. Okay. Dale, one of our fabulous audience members, he's sitting quietly in his chair and amongst the other 14,000 people. Dale says this: as some who is neurodivergent, why is it important to put a label on this?
That's right. That's right. And that is a very good point, because we do not have to label it. And the reason that it has been noticed and is starting to fall into the DEI category is because for many people, it's extremely difficult to go through the process of an interview process, which takes a lot of brain power. And so, like Byron said, there's a lot of people who are getting left behind because their neurodivergence, their challenges with being able to get through an interview process. Here's one thing, and I fell into this too. Oftentimes, when I was feeling that someone was in a higher position than me, I wouldn't look at them. I'd look down. And interviewers are not fond of this. And so when we're talking about labeling people, we're not trying to label people per se. We're trying to elevate their status enough to get those interviews, because otherwise we have all these people who are highly qualified. We all know people like this who are just, once they get in the door, they perform. They do a great job and they do great work. But getting through that interview process has been very difficult for a lot of people.
It has. And Teddy, yeah.
I was going to say, I understand where Dale's question is coming from. And as you said, Mariah, it's important not so much to label people, but for us to understand how to work together. So, when I don't need to call Randy bald, I can just know that he is bald and that he might appreciate a ski cap. But if Byron had, what's it called? Extensions and a full head of hair, and he may not want a ski cap. And I'm being ridiculous in my analogy because that's what I do, but that's why I think we need to understand each other to that extent for that goal.
Yeah. I wonder too, when it comes to, know thyself. And if I know that, for example, I don't like to have to communicate in groups, I don't like to talk a lot, I just want to be by myself and, let's say, peck away on a computer staring at numbers all day. If I know that, then hopefully the jobs that I'm going to look for would be in that vein. So are there certain jobs that certain types of folks tend to gravitate toward based on your experience and be successful and happy in them versus taking somebody who is I'll call it an introvert, but that's not, I think, what we're talking about with neurodivergency, but an introvert and, throwing them out in front of groups to inspire people?
Yeah, well, there certainly are. And I couldn't just go down through the entire list, but certain ones come to mind. Like, for example, people who work, because my experience, and I'm speaking as a neurotypical person here, my experience working with Mariah and around people like her is that they have certain likes and dislikes, and there are certain things that they just can't tolerate. And some of them are very simple, like harsh lighting in an office, for example. And the whole open office arrangement is a very, very difficult thing for them because they don't like they're hypersensitive to various stimuli. And so that's a real trigger for them. We'll talk about triggers later on. But they're very artistic people. Generally, these are terrible generalizations, but they tend to be very creative people, very artistic people. And so if they're put into a situation where they're just punching out widgets all day, they're not going to thrive in that. So those are just some very general, basic elements.
Yeah, let's and again, if you have comments or questions, Teddy's going to keep an eye on that. I am follically challenged, by the way, Teddy. That is,
I'm with you, buddy. I didn't want to call it all out that way. And but yeah, I mean, but it's a challenge that you don't have the ability to change, Randy. So why do we have to worry about it? Just, it is who you are, dude.
No, and I years ago, I shaved my head. I was one of the few Caucasian dudes walking around with a shaved head. This was back in the 90s. And you just didn't see that a whole lot unless your name was Telly Savalas or Yul Brenner. And I had people look at me like, ooh, this guy's some kind of rough, whatever. And it was just, I was on the leading edge. There you go, Byron. We were talking about that before we went on today. But I am what I am, to quote Popeye. And so I am, nothing's going to change. It is what it is. So, all right, let's talk about this mindset, this I am process and exercise. Let's get a little deeper into that if we can.
Yeah.
Well,
this is kind of Mariah's purview because I'll just lead it off by saying one of the things, this is a mindset thing. We have come to understand that whatever follows I am follows you.
Okay.
To elaborate on that, many
Get a
years
little
ago,
closer to the mic so we can hear you.
many years ago, I had read Louise Hay's book that talked about doing something called mirror work. That's where you look in the mirror and you tell yourself that you love yourself. And this was all about self-appreciation, self-esteem. And so I followed that somewhat loosely and knew that, yeah, that kind of worked for me. But it wasn't until a few years ago that I really leaned into this and understood that exactly what Byron said, whatever follows I am follows you. And realized that all these years I'd had imposter syndrome. As a matter of fact, when I'd get out of the helicopter to go get a patient, I would hear this little voice, like many people do. And many people who are neurotypical as well have that. That's not a neurodivergent trait. That's a trait among a lot of people where we feel like we have an imposter or that. But this exercise works for everybody across the board. And that's because once we start owning our own value and knowing that we are more than enough, and we can incorporate that with the I am exercise. And I encourage people, I created this I am affirmation exercise where people go look in the mirror, they say to themselves their name, they love that I love you. And that triggers a lot of people initially because we don't talk like that to ourselves. We usually are like, oh, how stupid. What do you think we were doing? Or we all have that. But I'd say the quicker you can turn it around, then if you have a negative thought, you say, oh, I'm so scared. Flip it. I'm so brave. Make yourself understand that you have the ability to put any word you want behind the I am. And your brain, after repetition and repetition and repetition, will believe it. I would never have guessed that I could be on podcasts, that I'd be a TEDx speaker, that I'd be a paid professional keynote speaker, even as few as 3 years ago. But I started doing my I am affirmation exercise, and I do it every couple of 3 hours. I personally do this because it works. And when I don't do this, I notice. And
So, Mariah, would you play with me a little bit here to play with our audience?
okay.
Okay.
I just asked our audience, and maybe this is not appropriate, and tell me if that's the case, or if I'm heading in the wrong direction, shut me down. I just asked our audience if they could write their simple I am statement here. And I wrote one that says, I am a professional podcaster.
Yeah.
So Mariah, do you have if you had an I am statement for yourself right now, what would it be?
Well, I go through the alphabet. So this is how proficient I am. I am aware my thoughts create my reality. I am brave. I am confident. I am determined. I am energized. I am focused. Oh, another thing. Sorry. Another thing.
You were in line. You did good.
That's another thing that's part of my dysgraphia is I have to stop. And this was unusual.
Yeah.
I stop and re-bring myself up to where I am in the alphabet because my brain doesn't sequentially follow the alphabet.
Yeah.
It's just part of me. And when I found that out, I thought, oh, that's nope.
That explains a lot.
Nope,
Yeah.
not going there. I am one of the smartest people I know.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
And so here's a context of I am that I say on a regular basis, and I got it, Randy. As I saw Randy look at the clock, we've been doing this for 185 weeks. What I hear people say all the time is I am just. And I will jump up on my freaking soapbox as fast as a cricket in a rainstorm, whatever that means.
Fast as those
stop it.
Those legs will take it, right?
Do not use the word just ever in context of who you are and what you do.
I love that. That's great.
Or only. I was only.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing I would add to that, if I may, at this point is, and I'll make reference to our books. The title is Journey Well, You Are More
Than Enough.
You know, because we hear that all the time. We hear, oh no, you're enough, you're good, you're okay. But we went a step beyond that because we put more than enough, simply because the word more cannot be defined. It's unlimited. And that's why we use that in our title.
Good stuff. Yeah. And we had a bunch of our audience jumped in and shared. Thank you. Diane, Christy, Dale, Leanne. I have a feeling you know who Leanne is. Leanne Hardesty.
Yeah, we do.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Because she's out there waving your flag for you.
So you say, Mariah, you say you do the I am exercise every few hours each day, and you say you notice it when you don't.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you notice when you don't?
I notice it when she doesn't do it.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, some world famous violinist, I forget who it was, said, if I don't practice twice a day, I notice. If I don't practice more than once a day, the audience notices. And so I use that as an analogy.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is I tend to go negative on myself, and I'll get down and say, oh, things are not going well, or I can't do that, or it's so atypical of me. And so I've found that by doing this simple exercise, and I even have alarms set on my phone with a favorite island song, because we lived on the island of Kauai, and that was home for me. And when that song goes off, I know I'm either in the bathroom or in my head doing my full alphabet.
That's where it is. How many languages?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. And because of knowing that we're in a global community, I've asked other people to translate it, and it's in 15 languages now, and it's free.
Wow, nice. Hey, we're going to throw out to Teddy for the halfway break. And when we return from that, I want to ask you about triggers. We talked about triggers, and we'll define those and try to get an understanding of how to deal with them. So, Teddy.
Yeah, I like Diane's. I am worthy of good things and embrace success. Yeah, really. Hey, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. It's October 25th. I think this is show 185. I think I discovered.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
185.
And our special guest, plural, are Mariah and Byron Edgington, and we now publicly stated that they're married without permission. I'm being facetious because I do that, play around, and the conversation is all about, I'm gonna say, elevate yourself by shifting your mindset. And we've already had some good thoughts and good ideas that have poked me and made me think differently. And let's continue going down this route. Randy, back to you, buddy.
Yeah,
you're in complete control.
Now we're all in trouble. All right, so we're talking about this I am exercise, and if there's any more to add to that, we can do that now. But also, I want to pivot and talk about triggers and how important it is to understand and to know those triggers and to be able to act upon them when they come your way. So help us understand triggers and how that plays out.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Randy. And one thing I would preface this by saying, neurotypical people like me, especially in a relationship, we have a real pivotal, to use your word, a pivotal role in this, because a little later we could talk about a thing called neuromasking. Mariah and people have to assume people like her get very, very good at neuromasking. And what that means is they hide their differences in order to fit in. And so my role in this, and this is very new to me, is I have learned roughly, I mean, I'm getting better at it all the time, but I have learned to tell when she's masking her true feelings or real intuitions. And I have to be very careful not to step on those as a neurotypical, because that's what we do. We just assume everybody thinks like we do, and it's just not true. So as far as triggers go, I think I mentioned the harsh lighting and the sounds and the noises and all that.
Yeah.
A little bit before that, but Mariah probably can address that better than I would.
Yeah, some things, and this is not blanket statement across the board, but I know personal other people that are neurodivergent, and they also have some of these triggers. One thing that we have to be careful of for me is when we're traveling, we make sure that I have food that's adequate for me, because I'm not a medical professional in this way that I can say nutrition wise why this is, other than I know that if I don't eat a regular protein and non-sugar, non-caffeinated things that take me up and then drop me. When I'm in situations where it's kind of a little more intense, such as driving in traffic or something. We were driving through Atlanta not too long ago, and I noticed that my blood sugar had dropped, and I just really noticed, because now we do, that was a trigger. All of a sudden I started getting very anxious, and that's not normal for me now. And so we're starting to pay attention to things, little things that we hadn't noticed before. I'd always had those things, but I didn't realize that was part of me and how I can now be prepared for it. So those are just a couple.
Now, in your books, do you touch on how to become aware of your triggers? Because it sounds like it's just what I'll call life. It's just how things are. And until or unless you recognize that, wait a second, it doesn't have to be this way. I can isolate it, I can act upon it, and move beyond it. But if we don't know we have it, we just think it's normal, like, hey, everybody's like that, then how do I identify these things?
We did talk about one that happened while we were in the process of writing the first book. One day we started talking about something that we wanted to put in a chapter, and it triggered something in my brain from way back when. And Byron, I was, well, maybe I should just say I was a little surly.
Okay.
and he said, well, I guess you're just going to be mad at me all day then. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at me. I didn't realize that I was projecting a negative out to the world, to him, and he was taking that on himself. So it's interesting when we become aware of our feelings and how we're triggered by things in the past, then we can look at it in a better way. And that's what we've found, and we're able to talk to people about. Don't be dragging your baggage from the past with you. If you can, just recognize that was a building block. That was a stepping stone in the past. Now move forward into making a better life for yourself and the people you're around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing we do talk about especially in Mindset Matters, book number 2, is the power of choice. There's a famous Viktor Frankl quote about that, where he said between action and react and response, there's a space. And I'm going to have to paraphrase because I can't quote him exactly. But Dr. Frankl said essentially, in that space is our growth and our freedom. If we can recognize that space and make a choice about how we're going to respond to whatever the action was, we're always going to grow and we're always going to be better off. And so one of the things we talk about in Mindset Matters is a lot of what we think is just a given is not. It's a choice that we make.
Interesting. And Teddy, you'll remember, hopefully, Cindy Martin is in our audience today, and she's been on the show several times the past few years, and actually, I think filled in for me once or twice when I was indisposed. Anyway, but I know in the past, Cindy has talked about this too, and that's knowing the triggers when you get into an interview. If words come up, to remember that, okay, when I hear those words, don't just go from 0 to 60, paraphrasing, but take that deep breath, step back and say, okay, I get it. Now I'm going to deal with this in a what I'll call a more organized way. Is that Teddy? Yeah. I think Teddy cat bit his tongue, so I'm not really sure.
I also use a phrase. I participated Mariah and Byron in raising 4 daughters.
Oh.
And and I made every freaking mistake you can make as a dad. And I know that in hindsight.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned is that there is a significant difference in the action and the result between react and respond.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And respond is my definition of the variance here is respond gives you the moment 10 seconds to freaking figure out what your next words are, Teddy.
Absolutely true. Yeah. I would use an aviation analogy in that, the FAA investigate, the NTSB, they investigate aircraft accidents.
Sure.
And fully 75% of all fatal accidents in aviation are caused by the pilot reacting too quickly.
Yeah.
Whatever the failure or whatever the malfunction was. 75% of the fatal accidents are due to pilots reacting right away instead of
overcorrecting or jumping the gun on that. Wow. Yeah. Hey, a lot of topics to cover. If you have other comments, questions for Byron and Mariah, put them in the chat. Keep an eye on it. Yeah,
Byron, tell me again that the Franco guy's name. What was his name?
Oh, Dr. Viktor Frankl.
Victor, spell his last name?
Yeah, last name's Frankl.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and that quote's one of his more famous quotes. Yeah.
What are let's if we could just rattle off a who's who aside from Mariah. What are a few other folks that we would know in history or in current times that are neurodivergent? What is the divergent factor that they're dealing with, and perhaps how has that helped them?
Yeah. Well, I guess the first one that comes to mind after Mariah, of course, is Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein, when he was in school as a child, the teacher told his parents he would never amount to anything because he couldn't do math. He couldn't do anything. He didn't have good social skills. He didn't have good number skills. And of course, the world knows better at this point.
One other one right now was recently, within the last few years, came out on Saturday Night Live and said, well, I'm the first open autistic person to host Saturday Night Live.
That's right.
And that was Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he said opened and first together because we know that there were probably more neurodivergent people that were on hosting Saturday Night Live.
Right, yeah.
Because a lot of comedians, a lot, like Byron said, those creative minds, a lot of people were, now they look back and they say that, yes, they had neurodivergent traits. They talk about some of the brightest minds, Steve Jobs. They look back and say, okay, you know, he was really creative. Possibly this might be something that he, and of course, the history, you don't really, that wasn't even a term back then. So they're just suggesting that some of these.
Yeah, and I would offer two more. Vincent van Gogh, at least looking back at his history, they're determining that he probably was autistic, and Frida Kahlo. And the reason I mentioned those two, and there was two artists, is we heard an interesting quote the other day from our mentor, Kim Calvert. And she said, there are no original paintings, none. The original painting was in the artist's head, and they just put down on a canvas what they already had in their head. So particularly in the artistic community, it's very, very common. And the other place you'll find a lot of neurodivergent people is in Silicon Valley. I mean, it's thick with them out there. So creative people, and this is why we say we need, as a society, we need to recognize these traits as benefits, because that's what they are.
Sure. Teddy, I don't know if you want to work in anything.
I will. I'll pull that one up. So Dale asked this question for a friend. He said, are there meds, call it what you want to call it, that neurodivergent individuals could use to help them manage themselves? And is cannabis one of them?
Well, it's fortunate that I'm not able to speak on this. I don't want to get you in trouble, Teddy.
Oh, I thought you would be able to tell some personal experience, Mariah.
Well, so what I can tell you is when I was first, many years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. It wasn't until much later that I realized I had the other dysgraphia and dyscalculia. But I went on a medication called Ritalin or Concerta, and that helped me to focus a lot. But the problem for me with it was I pretty much stopped eating because I wasn't hungry. And I also wasn't able to sleep. And so for me, it didn't work. And it's something that is individual. Now, I have heard people say that they do self-medicate with different things. And that I can't speak to, but I can say that when I was on that medication for a few years, I was able to really concentrate and block out a lot of my differing things. Now, one of the traits for me with ADHD is that if I find something that I'm very interested in, my focus is like a laser, even sometimes too much of a laser, because I really want to be more perfectionistic. That was part of our challenge in our books. But when I'm not focused on something, I'm all over the board. I have something called bright, shiny penny syndrome, where it's like, oh, look at that, or oh, look at that. We want to go elsewhere. But looking at medications and such, that's why there are so many physicians and psychologists and psychiatrists who do look at that, and they're able to help people if they need to.
Got it. A couple other topics we want to touch on today. At least I'd like to, if we can work them in. And one is for couples, and I'll use the two of you. You've been married for a good while, and it was later in your marriage that this neurodivergence topic came to light. So whether it's couples reigniting, maybe it's now empty nesters that, you know, the kids are grown and suddenly I have to stare at my spouse all the time. Like, who is this person? You always had kids running around. And so help us understand maybe, and give us some tips and some things that have worked for you and might work for other couples as they move through life.
Yeah, well, I guess let's just talk about all couples, not necessarily neurodivergent, neurotypical.
Okay. Yeah.
But for all couples, I think we need to be aware that you've got a lot of history together. You have a lot of the narrative is the same all through for several years, many, many years. And you have the same values, evidently. And this is kind of a mindset thing too, when you think about it, because we're convinced, and I'm not going to get off in the weeds here about neuroscience because I don't understand it, but we know that there's an energy that we all put out and we all take in, and we know that we attract the people that we're supposed to attract into our lives. And so if you can kind of make sense of that, I mean, this is, people write books about this topic, so I'm not going to get started on that. But if you know that we attract things into our lives, like a mate, for example, there's a reason for that. And so, what's the last time you thought you wanted, let's say you wanted to go out and get a brand new blue Nissan Leaf, an electric car. You just love that car. You got to have one. So you go buy one. And next week, what do you see everywhere? You see these blue Nissan Leafs everywhere. We're attracting this stuff into our minds all the time. And that's how we find our mates. And so taking that energy and studying it and expanding on it is bound to give you a better relationship.
Journaling too. I think that was something else that you mentioned the other day when we were talking, the power of journaling, and help us understand, I may jot down a note or two. That's not really journaling, is it?
Well, we started writing back and forth to each other very well when we first got together, and we continued doing it. And we even have something we coined the JATS, journal across sheets. And what we do is we have a simple notebook, and we to each other every day. It doesn't have to be about anything. It can be about everything. And maybe it's a paragraph, maybe it's a couple lines, and then the journal goes to the other one. And we write to each other, and we've found that simple activity has really increased our bond. Another thing that we do besides the JATS is we'll leave each other smiley faces. So we'll make a smile out of food and leave it on the counter, or in the bathroom out of Q-tips or something like that. And that just kind of bonds us. It's something that we do. Once smartphones came around, now we have hundreds of pictures of these.
We don't want to talk about all that. But I get it. Mariah, I've been married for 45 years, and I've completely trained my wife to be exactly what I expect of her. in my mind.
Sure, I can tell her that. I want to tell her that, Teddy.
Yeah, but the more we share notes between each other, and often they're get bread, get milk, do this, do that, and then maybe some other statement that we feel the desire, the interest to share, and it's never anything stupid or over the edge, Byron, sometimes on the edge. But I know that those kinds of notes between partners can have an impact. So I get it. Journaling between each other can have it.
Yeah. And one other thing I would mention is that we celebrate our relationship every month. Our anniversary is on the 29th.
Both of you do?
Yes, both of us do.
Okay, so how many months?
How many months is 45 years? Can you do that?
It's in the 600 space.
Could be.
It's a bunch.
Alexa, 45 times 12.
Oh boy, here we go.
She doesn't know either.
Hey, we had a guest on a couple 3 months ago, Teddy. It wasn't the 5 love languages, but the languages of what conflict was it in the workplace?
Oh, she started out when sorry isn't enough.
Sorry isn't enough.
That was where she started, but her the book became much more than that. It is who was that? That was Jen Thomas, Dr. Jen Thomas, the 5 apology languages. 5 apology languages. So when you talk about some of the things that you do with smiley faces, or, I think about the love languages and understanding what yours are and what your significant others would be as well. So it's I think more than anything else, it's awareness. I don't know if that's called emotional intelligence or not, because I was asleep in class that day, but knowing who you are and who you're dealing with.
That's right.
And one of the awarenesses that Byron offers me, and I've invited him to do this. So this isn't something that just automatically spill on your spouse. Okay. But when you know your own triggers, and you're able to say, hey, would you help me out? When you see me kind of getting in a little bit of a low mood, will you help me to do my I am exercise? Because I need his support, and it tells me that I'm not looking stupid to myself. It tells me that he is saying, hey, I love you enough to help you to know you can feel better. If a spouse saw somebody not brushing their teeth for a while, they might say, hey, you might need to do that. Well, this is for me like that. And so I've invited him to help me to maintain my mental health in a better state.
I want to make sure that I reiterate the words I heard you say. You have invited him to help you.
Yes.
That's right.
Not to take ownership of it.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Big
That's
difference.
key.
Yeah.
It is a big difference. I trust his support. I need his support.
Yeah.
Asked for help.
Yeah.
Randy, let me bring up, Lynn asked this question to our special guest. Is there a resource, a website, some online tool that that people can use to determine if there is some neurodivergence about them?
There are a ton of resources out there. So if they type in neurodiversity, they're going to get a plethora of information. And it's just really discerning the correct ones to go to. So Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic,
Got it.
places that are really well known,
Princeton is pretty good.
then you know you've got good information.
Yeah.
Cool. Lynn, I hope you got that, because I don't want to stop and go do a bunch of research right now. But yeah, I'm with you. Mayo Clinic, John Hopkins, et cetera, do a Google search on their sites for neurodiversity.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. And we've got a few minutes left, and I still want to tackle maybe the power of words and such, and how that impacts our lives. But I want to make sure that we mention anything you've got coming up, or your books, any more TED Talks coming up. What's on the agenda for you folks?
Yeah. Thanks for asking, Teddy. One thing I would mention in here is we talked about mindset. This is kind of the theme of the talk today, is mindset change. If folks go to our website right now, there's a QR code on there that will take you to our mentor, basically our mentor's site. And she is all about mindset. In fact, she is the premier mindset and self-improvement coach in the world today. And she's our mentor, Kim Calvert. If they go to that QR and check it out, they have access for, I think it says 2 weeks, to this particular product. And some of this stuff, and again, we're passionate about it. That it will change lives. If people go to that, it will change their lives.
And that is how I got started on this. Is I was unaware of any of this neurodivergent stuff until 2.5 years ago. And my eyes were opened to, oh my goodness, yes, there is a way that if I become aware of these triggers, if I become aware of what's going on in my brain, that I'm not really crazy, dumb, and stupid. I am so competent. I am amazing. And I now own the fact that I am very capable of bringing people elevation just by my words, because we know words are critically important. And when I can affirm you, and Teddy and Randy, you guys are doing an amazing job by bringing on your guests every week, and you really impact others because you took the time and you found people who can help others throughout your entire 185 episodes.
Yes, and speaking of time, that's a good one. In our first book, we have a whole chapter on words, and I would mention one very quickly. Yeah. One of the things we all commonly say, well, I spent a lot of time doing that. I spent a lot of time on that podcast. I spent a lot of time at work. We changed that to invest. You invested an hour today on Teddy and Randy's podcast, and it makes a world of difference. It changes the whole energy of the conversation if you invest your time.
Yeah. I have beyond real quickly, Randy, beyond participating in managing 4 daughters, I also have the side effect of that is I have 12 grandkids. And one of the things that I hear these young, I call them grand wee-wops will say about themselves, oh, I'm some of me, I'm dumb, I'm, the typical, I wish I hadn't done those. And again, I get up on my proverbial soapbox with them, and in a very empathetic way, I say to them, never say those words about yourself, ever.
No, in fact, I would interject something here that tell them this. I don't know how old they are, but tell them you would never hang around with someone
who called yourself
talks about you the way you talk about yourself.
Mhm.
Good point. Good
I
point.
was in a store. Yeah, Teddy.
No, go ahead, buddy.
I was going to say I was in one of my haunting ground Saturday morning shopping adventure stores that I frequent, and this past weekend I saw a husband and wife in slippers and PJs, so that'll give you an idea of where I hang out. Anyway, they had about an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, and just top their lungs, you're stupid, I can't believe you are so stupid, I told you blah blah blah, and for the whole store to hear. Yeah. And I came this close to stepping in and go, what, don't do that. And you just wonder how that kid's going to grow up when you see that kind of shenanigans going on, and it just tears you up as a parent. You think, holy cow. But it sounds like to maybe a lesser degree, I mean, you were bullied. I mean, you're thrown in a locker, you're told you're stupid, you don't fit in, and you begin to believe that stuff. Yeah, so we've got just a moment or two left. If you could take a couple of minutes and maybe give a takeaway or two, or maybe some words of motivation or inspiration for us.
You mentioned that I had heard those words growing up. And I want you to look, anybody who's watching this or hearing my words, I want you to know that this is possible for you too. You have a light inside you that is glowing. And once you start telling yourself all these I am positive affirmations, so whatever follows I am must be positive words. So start flipping those to positives. Get rid of those negatives, because you are a beautiful person inside.
Yes, and I would add something to that quickly. Both of our books cover these topics, and they will both elevate you. And again, back to mandate to elevate, we have found one of the byproducts of our endeavor, mandate to elevate, raising people up, is it's kind of selfish in a way, because anytime we elevate somebody else, guess what happens? We elevate ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's why we named that company that, and that's what we do. And it feels pretty darn good.
Dale wants me to appreciate him, while I'm also considering banning him from being on the show anymore, as he's playing with me, that he recognizes that I'm handsomely challenged.
That's a new one.
I know he's playing with me. Yeah.
That is a new one. Yeah. Thanks, Mariah Byron Edgington. Yeah. Mandate to elevate, and books are out there. TED Talk. Where do we find the TED? Is on your website, I assume.
Yeah.
And the website is
mandatetoelevate.com.
Yeah. How original. There you go.
There
you go.
Thank you, Teddy and Randy. We appreciate being here with you. It was fun.
Yeah, Teddy, I've got a story. I know the guest next week is yours, so you can talk about
do your story, and then I'll do the guest.
Well, and I have to give credit to my former colleague Ruth, who was with me at the Professional Center since its inception until she retired a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
excuse me, but I'm a joker. I'm kind of a silly comedian, a bunch of silly analogies, and I like to cut up and put people at ease that way. And that's not necessarily her bag. Her thing was encouragement. And same with Susan, who also worked with me, and I ran them both off. They retired. But what I learned from Ruth and from Susan both is to encourage folks, because when those job hunter folks come to me, they're broken to some degree. And their pride, their confidence, and whereas I'm more of a joker, let's get on with this thing. Here's the X's and O's, let's get it done. I found that as I get older, I spend more time than I used to in encouraging people and saying, hey, you can get this thing done. And I've had a bunch of them go, wow, you're the first guy who's told me that. And
yeah.
so, not to like this kind of thing, but just it sort of was another tool in my toolbox as I coach people through arguably a tough time in their life. So anyway, but it mirrors some of the stuff you're talking about, is just to be aware and to act. So I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts today. Teddy, I'll throw it to you to take us out of here.
Cool. Hey, Mariah, Byron, thank you both for being on here. I appreciate this. This is
Thank you. Thank you both.
great conversations that we could go into way deeper, maybe at another time, another area of it. So, hey, next week on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. And by the way, thank you to our audience. I love you all being out here.
Yep.
And I think we picked up a couple new people too. So thank you.
Yeah, we did.
Next week, our special guest is Carrie Vickery, North Carolina District Court Judge. And the conversation is going to be all about the business of being a North Carolina District Court Judge. We're going to find out a little bit more about who she is, why she does what she does. Again, Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy every Wednesday, 11:55 a.m. Again, to our special guests and our audience. Randy, buddy, good seeing you. We'll see everybody next week.
And what about that parking ticket, Teddy?
We'll talk about that later, Randy. I'll bring it up with HR.
There you go.
Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
All right.